Joe and Serenity, welcome to the Meat Mafia podcast.
Thanks. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah.
We're so pumped to have you. You're a second husband and wife combo.
Woohoo!
So we just released last week an episode with this awesome regenerative ranch called Holy Cow Beef out of Lubbock, Texas.
Cool.
So that could be a cool connection for you. But that was our first husband and wife combo, and now you're number two. So we're so pumped to have you on.
Thanks.
Yeah, great to be here.
And we're excited to dive into this topic in particular because we think our audience is going to love it. Speaking to baby formulas, baby nutrition, it's just such an untalked about topic. And we're just really interested in your guys' story, how you guys started the brand Serenity Kids and how you guys have grown to be here today.
Absolutely. Well, it's a little bit of a boring topic unless you're a parent
Right.
or planning to become one, right?
Yes.
So we didn't know anything about this until we started our family planning journey. But our story really starts in childhood. We were both sick little kids. We ate garbage junk foods from the 80s. You know, I ate lots of chicken and a biscuit crackers, and Joe ate what? Canned ravioli and nachos.
That was my
Yeah.
You know,
primary
That was your go-to.
food groups. Yeah.
Kids always have like one or two foods.
That's right. So we were on, I was on antibiotics all the time, which eventually led to leaky gut. And then in my 30s, I got put on a prescription medicine every day for the rest of my life,
Wow.
or for stomach pain. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. I don't know what I'm going to do because I can't eat food, but I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked out of the doctor's office with this prescription, like super bummed. You know, I'm like, I'm 33 years old. How am I getting a life sentence?
Mm-hmm.
And I called my dad. He's a shrink. He calms me down. And I'm like, Dad, what do? I can't eat any food without this medicine, but I don't want to take this thing forever. And he's like, you should read the book I gave you last year on the Paleo diet.
Mm.
And I'm like, what? He gives me dumb dad books all the time. I don't read them. But I found it on my bookshelf, and it was Mark Sisson's The Primal Blueprint that had just come out. And he also mailed me Rob Wolf's The Paleo Diet. I read the intro to the Paleo Diet, 12 pages, and I was sold.
Mm.
I'm like, all right, genetics, evolution, all of this makes perfect sense. So I'm going to try it and see how it goes. So I switched my diet to a bunch of veggies, clean meats, healthy fats, a little bit of fruit and nuts, and it worked.
That's incredible. Do you remember what the medication was that they had you on?
I think it was Prilosec or some kind of
okay.
proton pump inhibitor.
Okay. I had ulcerative colitis, so a very similar thing where they're
Yep.
like, you're going to be on this medication for the rest of your life.
Yep.
And the best we can do is put you in a remission, but you're going to have to take it forever. And similar to you, just showed through diet and lifestyle that you actually can get off these drugs, and the body is so self-healing.
Right.
So that's amazing. So it's almost like you had your own health experience that started to introduce you to diet and lifestyle. Joe, similar story for you too?
I did. I'm actually autistic. I was not diagnosed as a child. I was a really big energy. I didn't fit the stereotype of what they were calling Asperger's at the time. So they didn't really know what to do with me. I think my official diagnosis was obnoxious. I was just obnoxious.
Yeah.
And so it led to a lot of social challenges but also a lot of physical challenges, a lot of food sensitivities. I was super heavy metal toxic from, just not detoxing as quickly enough. Didn't know all that till adulthood, of course. But in my journey to integrate autism, I started experimenting with diet and when I met Serenity, she introduced me to the Paleo diet and fell in love with her and Paleo at the same time. Like her, it made total sense to me. I'm like, I know I don't detox well. Why don't I take out everything inflammatory? Like I should just stick to least inflammation possible. And the science is very clear on that, meats, veggies, fats, and cutting out sugars. I'd already been gluten-free for about like 6 or 7 years. Like I was gluten-free really early. Figured that one out just through trial and error, a lot of error. And, so really limiting dairy, limiting sugars, limiting processed foods was big. And I've also always wanted to have kids. I drew pictures of my future children when I was 5.
Brittany and Jason.
Yeah, Jason and Brittany were their names. I still have those pictures. So always wanted to have kids, and really my challenging experience as a kid left me really passionate to change the world for kids. So I really began my career in youth services, working with kids. I had this vision to change the way we treat and educate children. Wanted to start a school. There's different kinds of school models that focus on free thinking and emotional expression, letting kids be their full selves rather than putting them in these boxes. And so I had my first entrepreneurial experiment was a after school summer program and summer program for kids that the plan was to morph it into a school. Didn't work out. It's a very tough business model. I was not a very good business person. But I learned a lot about that and then met Serenity and once we started getting serious with it, my first thought was kids, like let's have a baby. And then her first thought was, what are we going to feed it?
Right.
Yeah.
So is Serenity Kids your second soiree into entrepreneurship?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, or fourth maybe, but it depends on what you count.
Yeah.
I had a coaching business. I had like a autistic workshop and like influencer education business. I started a lot of different activist group, like social justice and community groups. So a lot of volunteering, a lot of organizing, but as far as, so it's really sort of the third formal business and certainly very different than anything else.
First product too.
Yes, definitely first product, first thing that had employees and, this whole bigger thing.
How did you both go from passion for children into, okay, the business is going to be baby food. This is really where we want to focus.
Well, Joe and I were both at low points in our careers, kind of. He had taken a step back from working for this crazy, busy personal growth startup. And I actually had a business called Joy of Paleo. I was doing paleo coaching. Turns out no one really wants that. But I also learned a lot about business. And he had just read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. I'm like, hey, read this if you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. And he's like, okay, I'm going to start a product. That's what I'm going to do. And he had a couple different ideas. And then he actually came downtown to Austin to a lead gen event.
Capital Factory. I was hustling for coaching clients. I was doing dating coaching at the time. Just one of my many coaching experiments was they're looking for tech guys that had money but were bad with women.
You've done it all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And he came home and he's like, well, okay, I have to back up.
Yeah,
actually.
you missed a part.
I missed a part.
Yeah.
Why don't you just tell it?
Well, start with, so really we were in this entrepreneurial mode. I was looking for a business to start. And, Tim Ferriss outlines this formula, really, like you have a niche market that you're a part of, a gap in that market. How do you fill the gap and sell to that niche market, and then eventually automate the production and the sale of the product so that you're only working 4 hours? That was kind of the simplified 4-hour work week. Now you don't have to read it. And so I was on the hunt. What niche communities am I a member of? What are their products? I was actually working on an autism supplement company at the time. There was a lot of Chinese herbs that had really helped me integrate autism. It was like I could repackage some Chinese herbs and market them to the autism community. That was like one idea I had. But then we were at Paleo FX and...
That's right. We were at Paleo FX because I used to work for Paleo FX for a little while. They're here in Austin.
It's a big international paleo conference.
Yep.
No longer exists, but it was amazing
great
at the time.
Yeah. And so we were there together and I was really excited to bring Joe kind of into my world. These are like all my people and everyone's doing something cool. And he started talking about someday when we had a family and I started feeling fuzzy and maternal. And I'm like, Joe, let's go find the baby stuff, right? Let's find it. We found one person with a laptop that was a chiropractor that would work on pregnant women, which is rare. But that's all we found. We didn't find anything. And I went up to the CEO and I'm like, Michelle, where's the baby stuff? And she said, I ask myself that same question every year. Someday, maybe there'll be a baby food here. But at the time, I didn't know what babies really needed to eat. I mean, I knew through my own health journey what I needed to eat, but I didn't know, did babies need to eat rice cereal and apple juice? Like, I didn't know. So I wasn't really sure. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll just make our own baby food when it comes down to it, right? So I sort of put that on the back burner. But then Joe came back from this event.
Well, I was like, oh, paleo baby food.
Yeah.
There's a big niche, a big gap in the market. We could be the first paleo baby food. Of course, I had no idea how hard that was going to be. But it was like the biggest thing that I'd found. And when I went to that investment workshop and they talked about what investors would, but one of the problems with it was it would require capital, like to be able to start. That's not something you can start in your garage. And so I was like, oh, we could actually this is an idea we could actually raise money on. Like it's big enough that we could potentially raise money and use that to start the business.
So he came back from that event and he was like, we've got to start the baby food company. I'm like, what? Are you crazy? Like, we're not even engaged. Like, I don't know, but he planted a seed and I'm a huge nerd. So I spent my summer researching what do babies need? And it took me only about a month. Conveniently, a lot of my health icons Rob Wolf, Chris Kresser, Melissa Urban, like they had recently had kids. And so they were all blogging about what they were feeding their kids. So I got a lot of insights there. And really all of them, to some extent, were compromising nutrition for convenience. And I'm like, man, if these are the pinnacle, the people who I look up to the most, and they're doing a little bit of compromising for convenience, then I know that everyone else sure is too, right? So I spent my summer reading blogs. I read books. I listened to podcasts. I read the USDA's Guide to Infant Feeding, which, was more on point than I thought. And really, they all pointed towards eating how I ate. It took me about a month to realize that there was already a perfect baby food that we could just mimic our products after, and it was breast milk. So I dragged Joe to the breast milk here in Austin, which is the biggest in the country.
The milk bank.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The milk bank. Sorry.
The breast milk.
The breast milk.
Where is that? Just a big sign.
Yeah.
It's downtown. And a tiny little plug for moms out there. Don't throw your stashes away if you have them in your freezer. You can donate them and can actually keep premature babies alive. It's really cool. So I learned a lot about breast milk, and it's a lot of fats, a lot of protein, a lot of carbs, right? It's a balanced macronutrient profile.
It's also an animal product. I like to call it a free-range animal product.
Yep. And so we did a lot of research, and then we decided to hire a VA to pull the data in the industry. What was out there already? So I can't remember.
There were 246 organic baby food pouches in the marketplace that we could find online and stores. And we had this VA put all them in a spreadsheet and map out all the macronutrients and figure out. And it was quite scary. I mean, there were less than 4% had meat. Even though the USDA, all the bloggers, everybody said babies need meat, babies need animal products, breast milk's an animal product, animal products are key, but no meat in baby food, basically, less than 4%. Less than 1% had any amount of fat, really, and babies need 30 grams of fat a day, which would be like 300 grams of fat a day for you or me. So a huge breast milk is calories of breast milk are almost half fat. So it's a really key nutrient for the brain, but baby food was just lacking. There's just no fat. The kind of low fat movement of the 80s had trickled down to baby food, and they thought, oh, fat isn't healthy, but babies needed it. What they did have was a lot of sugar. It was a lot of fruit purees. So they're using this shelf preservation model that relies on a high acid product, and they did that with fruit. So the baby food, the organic baby food pouches were overwhelmingly fruit. Average 9 grams of sugar per pouch. For a 15-pound baby, that's 9 grams is like 90 grams for a 150-pound adult. And there's no fat or protein to balance that out. So it's like straight blood sugar spikes. They have to eat multiple of them at a time because there's no nutrition. It's just filler. Right. And so they're eating 2-3 of these pouches. That's 30 grams of sugar. That's a Snickers bar.
Yeah. What are the implications of a baby eating like that?
Right? That's the same. If you imagine if we ate overwhelmingly sugar or carbs without everything else, there's everything from mood issues to issues. Really, all the issues people complain about babies are mostly diet related, or at least can be regulated through diet. So it can lead to fussiness and crying, right? Because they're having blood sugar spikes and drops. It can lead to sleep issues, babies waking up, not being able to sleep right. It can lead to stool issues, whether it's constipation or diarrhea, never anything you want when you've got a kid in diapers. They're both really stressful. It can lead to immunity suppression, and so they're getting sick. Nothing's worse than a sick baby. Like, it's awful. And yet babies are known to get sick. It can lead to skin issues. Skins and rashes are common in a lot of babies. We didn't have any of those issues with our daughter, and people that we know that eat and feed their kids like us have much fewer of those issues. We're not allowed to make any specific scientific claims about it because we haven't done scientific testing on babies. But we anecdotally and just from anybody logically, the way you eat and the way it affects your mood and your immune system in your body.
I mean, my name is Serenity, but we named the business Serenity Kids because that's what every family wants. And if you feed a kid a balanced meal that's satiating, that's full of protein, that digests at the right rate, right? That's not going to spike their blood sugar, that's what you get.
Totally.
It's really cool.
So you were saying, there are 250 organic products that your VA pulled, and only less than 1% of them contain fat. That's crazy.
It's criminal.
It's criminal.
Yeah.
So for conventional baby food products at the grocery store, supermarket that most people are buying, what would you rate them nutritionally on a scale of 1 to 10?
Man.
Probably a 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Depending. If they have avocado, maybe a little bit more. right? A couple of them have like a couple drops of avocado. The veggie-based ones are better, right? Because they have a little bit more nutrition. They've got good fiber and less sugar, just in general. I mean, like plain fruit's fine. You know, we feed our kid regular old plain fruit. But when you cook it way down and you strain the fiber out and you concentrate the sugars, you're going to get a less nutritional product.
What sort of fats are they using in place of the animal fats that you would normally see in your guys' baby food?
They're really only using dairy.
There's a
Conventional
tiny
cow's
bit of
milk.
avocado. Couple of products had avocado, but most of the 1% was products that had milk in them.
So with the pureed pouches that you brought, so you're specifically trying to mimic the macronutrient profile of breast milk. Is that correct?
We're getting close. You know, we have a little bit more protein than breast milk would have from a ratio standpoint, but we also know we're not the only thing that these parents are feeding their kids, right? So if they're feeding them any other fruits, other baby food pouches, they're not getting the protein there.
It's likely carbs that they're getting beyond our products. And so we up the protein a little bit to balance that out.
Yep.
And, you know, and they babies need about 12 grams of protein a day versus the 30 grams of fat. So they need a lot of fat. But if they're eating breast milk, they're as well, hopefully they're getting a lot of fat from that.
So close to like a gram of protein per pound of body weight for a baby. Is that similar to humans?
Maybe.
Ish.
But
Sounds right.
the thing is that there's not a lot of studies on babies because it's not really an ethical thing. Don't get me started on the infant formula business. Like that is a crazy thing that they do. But so it's a little hard to tell. For the first time ever in 2020, the USDA actually put out guidelines for feeding children under the age of 2. That had never, ever been done before. I had read the USDA's Guide to Infant Feeding, which was a WIC-based program, right? I don't know if you guys know WIC, but it helps out women with infant children, people who don't earn enough to be able to buy the kinds of foods that they need. And so it's really supportive. That's what I had read before. But when the guidelines came out in 2020, I mean, I had been like on the edge of my seat for 3 years since they announced it. Like, what are they going to say? I knew that there were some like vegan doctors on the board. And I was really scared about mostly just people misleading parents, right? I really just, I care so much about the babies themselves. That's why I do all this. But they came out and lo and behold, our products fit the exact profile of what they recommend.
We're really the
children
only products that fit the profile.
That's right.
Were you guys surprised?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised.
Just from a politician standpoint, I was surprised. I just didn't have a lot of
I knew
faith
the
in our
vegans
government.
were going to lose. But it came down, the biggest debate were these vegans trying to say that plant-based protein is equal and that they should explicitly recommend plant-based protein. And the science won that said that no meat and animal products are the most important and that plant-based protein is not actually good for babies. And they all agreed on sugar. So sugar was the big thing. No sugar, limit sugar. They came out very supportive of animal products, which we're really glad to see. But mostly they just said it should be balanced, which is not a big surprise. It should be this nice balance of carbs, fat, and protein with a good amount of fat, more fat than the average adult would eat because they're growing so fast. But that, was pretty clear.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that was really cool when we were researching you on your website, you mentioned that the metrics that you guys measure yourselves, you don't use the FDA metrics, you use the EU metrics. That's because there's a higher level of scrutiny, more scrutiny around ingredients. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because we thought that was really cool that you do that.
Yeah, I got sideswiped when I guess Della was, how old was she? She was just born, right? Yeah. And the U.S. government or some watchdog organization, I don't remember, but they had put out a thing about heavy metals and baby foods. And I was like, whoa, wait a second, you guys. Like heavy metals and baby foods? I didn't know anything about this. And this is really important to me, especially having an autistic husband who doesn't detox properly necessarily.
I was
really,
like 99%
really well.
lead toxicity. Like I was like off the charts on lead and had to do 6 months of chelation.
So I had a lot of reason to make the baby food better for my own kid, right? And I'm like, what do we do? We don't know how to test for this stuff. We don't know anything about this. And so we hired a quality director, and her first assignment was to put together a heavy metals program for us because the FDA doesn't have one for baby food at all. They have one for rice cereal. They just released their apple juice one. Was it last week or the week before? Really recently. It took 10 years for them to do that. And the hardest part for us was really determining our own internal standard. How are we going to run this program? And we used the EU standards for heavy metals. There's a few different heavy metals, and we had to sort of cherry pick here and there. So they didn't have standards for everything we wanted to have standards for. We also used California's Prop 65, right? They've got some rules, so we were using those where we could. And ultimately, the answer for is this what kind of product do we want to make was, would I want to feed it to my own kid?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we were coming out with our puff product, one of the main reasons we came out with it was because almost all other puffs are made out of rice, which is, as you guys know, really high in arsenic most of the time, or maybe all the time.
So some of the rice puffs were 10 times the safe level of arsenic.
It's terrible.
They're feeding
We're feeding this to babies. Yeah. And so we had a really hard time when we were formulating that product, getting it to meet our internal specifications. And I'm like, guys, I don't even know if we can make this product. Because as it is now, I wouldn't feed it to my own kid. It's not going to fly.
Yeah.
But then we managed to find an amazing supplier that had really good soil, clean soils. They had not been contaminated, and we were able to launch it. But it was not easy.
I've heard that the statistic is 95% of conventional baby foods have some type of heavy metal toxicity. Is that true?
Yeah, and organic. So 95% of baby food overall.
In general.
Yeah. In fact, some of the organics were worse than the conventional ones. Not necessarily because they're organic. It just shows you that being organic doesn't limit the heavy metals that are in the soil necessarily. But yeah, our whole food system's contaminated.
That's right.
Decades and decades of leaded gasoline and air pollution that ends up in the soil, and
factory
waste, obviously agrochemicals, all the tons of agrochemicals that are petroleum based. So we've got our whole food supply is essentially contaminated, with baby food being the most urgent to fix, because they're so sensitive, they're so vulnerable, and there's such a disproportionate amount of their food coming from these packaged products because it's so hard to make purees. And so that was where the urgency came. And with this first study she saw, they only tested 25 products. It was a very small study that got us started. But by the time we'd really launched, the federal government had gotten involved, and there's a lot more awareness about how toxic chemicals are ending up in baby foods. And we were essentially the gold standard that every mom could trust.
Can you guys speak to the history of the industry itself? Because for a while, I'm sure, before industrialization, it was really just like breast milk, cow's milk, and then maybe a few supplementations from real foods. And then at some point it shifted. So I'm curious if you guys have some more information on that.
Well, Amy Bentley wrote a great book called Inventing Baby Food. If you have any interest in digging
Inventing Baby Food.
Inventing Baby
that.
Food.
Yeah.
It's a great book. It came out in, I think, 2012. And it chronicles baby food use from the late 1800s to present. And so in the late 1800s, women started working outside of the house more, and they tried to feed babies with a mixture. They called it pap. It was a mixture of flour and water. And then they had babies dying because you can't live on flour and water. But they didn't know about vitamins and minerals then, right? It looked like milk. So anyway, so baby foods really started coming out after World War II when canning, and when a lot of women went into the workplace, and there was a lot of canned. At first, they were prescriptions. You had to go to a pharmacy to get them, and all this stuff. It was called strained peas, strained beans, all that. There was a lot of organ meats. There was a lot of bone broths. There was a lot of just really healthy collagen, like all kinds of meats. And in the kind of 50s and 60s, and then in the 70s, people started getting away from these nutrient-dense foods for whatever reason. I don't actually know, like our culture as a whole. And there was actually a really big heavy metal scare in the 70s. There was lead paint-lined baby food jars, baby food cans. And so a lot of moms decided they were not going to buy any baby food at all, and they were going to go ahead and make their own for very good reasons, right? And so the baby food sales declined. And then in the 80s, they fixed the lead-based paint issue, but they were still adding MSG, sugar, and a lot of salt to the baby foods that, they didn't necessarily need to be in there. So there was a big call to clean that up. And then there has just been, since then, the pouch has come out, and it is actually really hard to get food into that little pouch. Like, it is expensive. It's complicated to make the pouch. It's It's really tricky. And so I think that after the jars kind of went out of favor, the glass jars, then it's been harder and harder to make money on baby food because they're all selling the same thing, right? It's exactly the same thing. It's apples mixed with maybe some green beans and some strawberry. Like, it's pretty much the same thing.
Well, and the shelf stability process for the pouches is harder than the jars. And
that's right. It's much harder.
The hot fill process they use with the fruit purees is a lot cheaper. It's a lot easier than the retort canning process that we use. And their whole business model is based on that hot fill process, which requires a high acid product. So it's one of the reasons they're mostly fruit
because vegetables are not high acid.
Or meat, or fat or protein, right? Basically, you've got the pouch kind of ushered in an era of even more fruit heavy products. Actually, when we, the 246 pouches were the organic baby pouches, when we expanded that to include Gerber and all the glass jars, it actually was better. The Gerber products were a little better. It was actually 10% meat when you started including Gerber, because they have these chicken and beef purees that mostly people feed to their pets, I think.
Cats.
Yeah, they're pretty gross. But at least it was there. And the sugar was similar, because they still put fruit in so many things.
It's interesting to think about like food in the context of technology. And Harry and I have talked about this before. I think as a society, we almost just assume that because technology is rapidly advancing, that all these other parts of society, including nutrition, are also advancing as well. Where a lot of what you're talking about is we actually had it really nicely figured out 100 years ago. And like what you're doing with Serenity Kids is you're just reverting back to these ancestral principles of how babies have always been fed. And then you have this industrial food complex that really started to emerge after World War II. And it's like we're digging ourselves out of this hole. So here you are paying way more for your ingredients than your competitors, but that's literally what you have to do to be able to give moms and dads and kids the best possible food that you can.
That's
so
right.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So your guys' product compared to the average product on the shelf, how does it compare price-wise?
So our core of our products are these meat and veggie pouches. This is our grass-fed beef with organic kale and sweet potato. Kind of what you'd get at a fancy restaurant, the grass-fed steak with the side of kale and sweet potato, right? So good tasting, good blends of high quality, really well-sourced ingredients, and versus the other pouches are mostly, fruits with some veggies. So our meat and veggie pouches go for about $3.99, depending on the store, whereas the other fruit pouches are anywhere from $159 to $199. So when we launched, we were essentially double. We came out at double the price of everyone else, and the stores were very worried about that. They were not sure that people would pay that, and we convinced them to take the risk, and we were right. People are happy to pay more for those. If they eat about one pouch a day, it's about $120 a month. It's really not, and of course, if you're making your own food and you're feeding them what you're eating, they're eating breast milk. The idea isn't even that they eat one a day. Like that's even could be a lot, but even at that, it's affordable.
It's one of the things we talk about a lot on the show, where people think about their health as this cost, and they're unwilling to pay for food that actually nourishes you, but then they have to account for the healthcare cost down the road. And I imagine for you guys as parents and the owners of Serenity, it makes so much sense to be paying for a product like this, where you're actually setting your child up for a lifelong of positive health outcomes instead of these negative ones that so many kids are seeing.
Yeah. Not to mention they're not crying as much. They're not getting sick. They're sleeping better. All these things that money can't buy. And most parent, if they could, would spend money on that.
One of the things you mentioned is that Paleo FX had a huge impact on you. You worked for them, right?
Yeah, I did.
And there's so many emerging brands that launched there. It seems like that really gave you the proof of concept of like, well, if these other people and brands are doing it, why can't we? I would just love for you to talk about what was the feeling like the first time you guys actually had a Serenity booth with product in hand. People are coming up to you, they're interested, they're buying it. How cool was that? What was that experience like?
It was the following year after we had the realization at Paleo FX when Michelle said, well, I keep wondering. And in fact, she had purchased cavebaby.com because she had noticed a white space in the industry. A lot of people, it turns out, had noticed the white space in the industry. And it was just, we were the first ones to do anything about it. But we had a booth the following year. Did we have samples that year? We had some benchtop samples from the factory. And it was just like, it was such a high. I mean, it was like Christmas Day, 3 days in a row. everyone that came to our booth was like, this is so cool.
Finally.
Like, every single person. And they're taking pictures and they're asking questions. And I'm like, can we get you on our email list? Because that's how we had developed the products. Is I had some paleo friends that had maybe had kids or were thinking about it. I'm like, hey, what would you be interested in? You know, so they're the community that actually built our brand.
Wow.
And it felt so good to be there and be like, look what you guys helped us make. And look what now is out there for the rest of the world. Because, you know, we're a niche community, right? But it's also, the world needs this more than just, like, we had sort of started out with the Tim Ferriss model to be just a little paleo niche brand.
Yeah, we bought Paleo Baby. PaleoBaby.com was the original name.
That's right. And
but it was actually Taylor and Katie from Epic Bar.
That's right.
Who we met through Paleo FX, who we sat down with, and they were like, no, don't call it paleo. If you notice, Epic's never been called paleo anywhere. And we're like, oh, I didn't even really notice that. It just is paleo, and all the paleo people know it, but then anybody who has weird stereotypes about paleo doesn't get turned off. And they were very clear. They'd also thought about starting Paleo Baby food. They said people are like blending up Epic bars in their blenders for their babies. And they were 6 months pregnant and had just sold to General Mills. So they had some time on their hands and offered to help us. So they introduced us to regenerative agriculture and retail business. And
our brander.
We use the same brander. It's why our branding looks a little similar to Epic, you know, with the animal silhouette. And but a lot of amazing entrepreneurs from the paleo community and influencers. We really launched our marketing campaign was based on a lot of paleo influencers supporting us and promoting us as the first baby food that they could actually recommend.
So Taylor and Katie, they were early investors, right?
Yeah, they're our first advisors on our first advisory board, still on the advisory board.
And Rob Wolf was too, right?
Rob Wolf's on the advisory board, Sarah Ballantyne, paleo mom. Now she calls herself Nutrivore.
Yep.
Is
she's
on
got
the
a
board.
great account. So you've gone through the shift of these people that taught you a lot about diet and lifestyle are now colleagues and actually investing in your brand. That's a very special feeling, I'm sure.
And they still support us. We're like, we're getting some hard questions about, I don't know, lutein or something. And I'm like, Sarah, help us figure this out. And so she will always help us out. And I mean, we even hired her to help us develop our toddler formula recipe. When Della, my daughter, unexpectedly weaned at 9 months, I was devastated because all of the formulas out there had industrial seed oils, every single one of them. And they had synthetic folic acid instead of the folate or methylfolate. And I was so bummed about it.
Most of them had corn syrup or rice syrup.
Oh, yeah. They were full of garbage. The
first couple ingredients were like corn or rice syrup and vegetable oil. We're like, really? Like, that's your carb and fat source?
Sad.
Like,
But I called her up and I'm like, hey, do you want to help us make the best formula in the whole wide world? And she's like, you know, I've said no to so many offers and projects lately, but this one, I've got to do it.
Yeah. What was it about the message that you guys had that got these big influencers so invested in you guys? I mean, clearly the product fit was there, but was there anything else that they were seeing that had them really excited about going on this journey with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think people like our story is very real. It's a very common story. Serenity's health issues, our passion for children, our willingness to put ourselves out there. So I think people are inspired by our commitment and our passion, our willingness to do it, our personal health journeys. But ultimately, I think it really is a lot about the product. It's like, I really want to share a baby food with my audience. People are always asking me, what do I feed my baby? And they had nothing to give them. So there was a value we brought to influencers to say, hey, now you have a baby food that you can genuinely recommend and is a really value add for your followers. Plus, we've got affiliate programs, so we'll give you a kickback.
And there's also the fact that we really built this company through the generosity of others, honestly. We had so much input and feedback and free consulting, and we'd go to meetups and learn about the retail food business, which is impossible to navigate without like a dictionary and all this stuff. And we would take their recommendations. We would do what they say. We're like, okay, 6 months later, we did this. What's next? And it's so satisfying. I don't know if you guys have ever coach entrepreneurs or anybody, but like if you ask someone who's way ahead of you for help and then you actually do the thing and you make progress and you implement their ideas and you go back and you're like, do you want to help me again? It's it's satisfying to be like, yes, actually, I do want to help you on this journey. So, I mean, we have a noble mission, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who can argue with babies. Like,
Yeah.
conveniently, we have a really noble mission.
Such a powerful
also.
mission.
That's right.
Do you think a lot of new founders make the mistake of not open sourcing feedback like you were able to?
Oh yeah. People were very surprised at how open we were to taking advice, how they were like she said, we'd get advice, we'd take it, we'd go back, say, we did all that. Now what they'd be like, you actually did it? Like they were astounded. Now I give people advice and it's most of the time I have one conversation, I give them a bunch of advice, never hear from them again. So, we were very active about taking their advice, coming back, asking for more, asking who else we should talk to, taking interest, calling those people, getting advice from those people, eventually formed this advisory board and gave people shares. We had to build a cap table to give away shares. Like we gave away shares for advisors before we'd raised any kind of money because we knew that advice was so valuable. But I think there's a lack of humility in founders a lot. They think they know it all. They think they're, that their idea and that they're the leader and they're the one. And it's hard for them to take good feedback. And we were always very humble about, hey, we've never been in the food business. We don't know anything about any of this. We'll do whatever you say.
Sometimes it actually helps to just be at zero and not know much because you have to learn along the way.
Yep.
Can you guys speak to the entrepreneur who's listening to this, who hears your guys' story and just is blown away by how far you guys have come and the products you guys have? Because I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're starting from zero, they think it's unattainable. But for people who have started taking action and doing things, you look back and you go, wow, we've actually done a whole lot. And it really just started with a few short actions. So I'm curious what your guys' advice would be to early entrepreneurs.
Well, the commitment is key.
We burned the boats.
You gotta be all in. Right. And so we started the whole business on our personal, all our savings, all our credit cards, maxed out all our credit cards, family loans, cash to forward, everything, we put it all in. And so by the time we were ready to raise money, it was very clear that there was no stopping us. It's like you either you give us money or somebody else is going to give us money, or we're going to find money somewhere, then we're going to do this. So there's got to be that feeling from everyone, whether it's investors, advisors, employees, everyone's got to know that you don't need them to do this, that you're on track and this is a moving train that they can get on or not. And that's the attitude you have to have, but it has to be true. You can't really fake that. Like they've got to feel, and there's a lot of challenges early on. There's a lot of challenges today. There's a lot of reasons to quit all the time. Especially early, there's where there's that kind of no go moments, which people ask us, was there a moment where you thought about quitting? And for me, there really isn't. Like there were some really big challenges where I was like, if this doesn't get fixed, we're going to have to pivot this quite a bit, but it wasn't like we're going to quit. It was like, it's just going to be a big pivot. So Serenity might have
I had a moment.
She's had some more doubt than me.
Yeah, I had one moment. It was October of 2017. We had been trialing our beef, chicken, and at the time, uncured bacon, RIP, uncured bacon, pouches.
Say a prayer.
I know.
Bring it back.
Yeah. Someday.
We'll resurrect that piggy someday.
It's never dead.
Yep. But we had just not been able to make the product on the equipment. It was equipment that was made for fruit purees, and our high-fat, high-protein, meat-based puree was just really hard technically to produce. We had, 9 or 10 failed trials. It was really
all our savings money that we'd spent on these things, the packaging, the ingredients, all just going down the toilet.
So painful. And then our factory came to us and said, we don't think we can make it. Call these other people. I had already called all those other people and they wanted, the runs were huge. It was $250,000 to run the first run. I'm like, we didn't have that. It was really hard. And I was like, we were getting married in a month. And I'm like, Joe, do we even have a company anymore? What are we going to do? And he's like, this is no problem. We will just call everybody. So we got on the phone. We talked to 50 or 100 people in a couple days. We found an ops person. We hired a consultant. We made it through. But at that point, I did ask myself the question, are we going to keep going? And it's the mission that keeps us going every single time.
Picking a mission so strong that's what compels you when you just hit insane adversity. And Joe, one of the things that I love that you said is this concept of really burning the boats and going all in and being willing to sell your savings, sell your 401k, because we're in year one of where you were when you first launched. And it's like Harry and I did those things, and you have this moment of like, am I doing the right thing? Because everyone is telling me that I should be, using these savings mechanisms and investing in my 401k, but that's like version 1.0 of yourself, version 1.2.0 when you're becoming the entrepreneur is like, you need capital, you need to be able to invest in yourself. And that old school thinking is gone. You need to just go for it, really. But it's a lot easier said than done.
Totally. Yeah, it's a spiritual practice.
Spiritual practice. I like that.
Like parenting. They're very similar spiritual practices. You can't do it just for the outcome, because the outcome's unknown. You have no idea how your kid's going to turn out. You have no idea how your business is going to turn out. So it has to be for the process. You have to believe that I'm supposed to do this in this moment, and I don't know if it's going to work or not. There's a surrender.
And
it's
faith.
like, I have no idea. I don't really know how or what's going to happen, but I feel every part of me knows that this is the right thing to do. And that's very infectious. If people surrender to that kind of vision and that mission, people want that for themselves, and they want to come along and help and support. And ultimately, that was how we raised money, was with investors that could feel that. We didn't have a product. We didn't have a proof of concept. We didn't have any background in food. Like, we were kind of a risky investment. It was a huge opportunity, right? Yeah. We showed how big the white space was, how intuitive it was that people would want a premium meat and veggie baby food. Like, the idea was clear, but our ability to execute, we had no track record or proof of that. So they had to really believe in us, that we were gonna do whatever it took to make that happen. And of course, they're all very happy now.
Well, going all in is something that so many people struggle with. And if I have one takeaway from this year, it's that the power of it's almost like a universal principle. When you do put yourself in, fully committed to something, things just start to work out. And it's because it's almost like, you're playing offense at that point. You're not thinking about what could go wrong. You're thinking about, I'm just going to make this go right. And there's just so many people out there. It's like, they just need to let go of one thing and then just commit to it.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you guys have had any other moments in your life where you felt that feeling of going all in, whether it's entrepreneurship or just anything else. I'm sure raising a family is one of them.
That's the one decision that you can really never take back. Right? Yeah. Once you're a parent, you're always a parent.
Yeah.
You can get a tattoo removed these days even, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big decision for me, for sure. It was much easier with a partner who was really into it.
Yeah.
Did you have any other moments like that, Joe?
I've had a variety of kind of spiritual awakenings. In high school, I had a spiritual awakening where I realized that I should be living for doing the right thing rather than the fun or pleasurable thing, that I was going to receive more out of life. And there's actually more pleasurable to follow a moral life than a hedonistic life, which is, as a teenager, it's very few teenagers realize that.
Totally.
So that was like a big one. I had another one in later adulthood where I realized that working with kids was my calling, that I needed to really go deep on children and how I was going to change the world for kids. That was my pain as a kid, that was what that was for, that I was given that experience so that I could change the world for other kids. And then I think, there's another moment where that was true with autism as well. I'd kind of really not talked about autism much. I was pretty quiet hadn't learned a lot about it. And there was a moment when, that I was like, oh, I need to really embrace this. There's not enough awareness about this. I need to talk about this. I need to use my superpower, my autistic superpowers, which were mostly communication oriented, to talk about autism and how it led me here, and how it is a big part of my life, and how autism is a positive thing, is a thing that can be embraced, and people shouldn't be ashamed of it or hiding it. There are a lot of challenges too, so that's definitely real, but to treat it as a pariah or this thing to be ashamed of, was really important.
Yeah, your story kind of reminds me of Ari Emanuel, who's like the biggest talent agent ever. He built William Morris Endeavor. They bought the UFC, the WWE. When he's brothers with Rahm Emanuel, who's the mayor of Chicago, and then their other brother ran the hospital at Johns Hopkins. So two super accomplished brainiacs. And Ari was like the little brother who's severely dyslexic and ADHD, and everyone thought he was really stupid. And as he got older, he actually realized that those things were his gifts and his superpowers, like you mentioned with your autism. And that's like the energy everyone says he has this special energy that's propelled him to being like the top of his field and the top of his craft. So it's cool that you say that, like actually owning this thing it's an actual gift for you and it's a superpower. And that's what's part of what's made both of you so successful. It's so cool to hear you talk about that.
Yeah.
Not to change gears too much, but Serenity, one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about, you mentioned that your baby Della started weaning at 9 months. Do we know why babies wean or they don't take to breast milk? And for any aspiring moms or moms out there that are thinking formula, like what should they be thinking about in terms of formula?
It is so hard. Just nursing in general is hard. But for me, there are actually a lot of physical challenges. So as we degrade our genetics, frankly, from eating agricultural foods for the last thousands of years, we are actually malforming the middle third of our babies' faces.
Wow.
And there's lots of sinus issues in some agricultural communities, really bad teeth. If you guys have read Breath or anything by James Nestor.
Yes.
And so one of the other things that comes with that is a lip tie and a tongue tie. So these little kind of pieces of skin, I guess, like right underneath your top lip and right underneath your tongue, they really can inhibit the nursing posture needed from an infant's mouth. And my daughter had a lip tie that we did not get revised for soon enough, really. So she had always had trouble latching. It was extremely painful for me. So painful, which made it crappier to do, which just made it really hard. I also struggled with hydration a lot. So now I can take Element because it exists out there and I recommend it. In fact, we send new mama kits to a lot of new moms and we always put Element in there because it's just a hydration necessity. When you're outputting that much liquid, you have to be intaking it plus all those electrolytes. And then there is because we don't live in community anymore, there are no nursing role models for most women. Maybe you saw your mom nurse your younger sibling, but most people don't have any experience witnessing it, talking about it, learning about what's normal. Conveniently, my mom was a super crunchy hippie in the 70s, and she had La Leche League meetings at our house when I was a baby, where moms bring their babies. You can nurse all like with each other. You can talk about what's going on. I'm bleeding this thing. My kid's poop looks like that. Like all this stuff that you wouldn't normally talk about. And so I went to a few of those meetings before I had Della. They're free. It's a nonprofit put on by the community. And I just learned a little bit about like, where can I go get support? Lactation consultants. There's so many of them. There are really fancy prescription pumps that if your kid's having trouble latching, you can go get these pumps that at least keeps your production up. Because what happens is if you don't use it, you lose it. So with the trouble that I had with dehydration and then latching, my supply tanked. And so then it became unsatisfying for her because she was doing all this effort and not getting much out of it. And so she just kind of stopped. And it was, like I said, devastating, but also that you turn their pain into the thing, right?
Yeah.
So we've got this amazing formula that's out there. It's the closest thing to breast milk in the entire world.
Anything ever created.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of our fatty acid profiles and our protein sources and our fat sources and our carb sources. Like, in fact, I'm going to the factory next week. I can't wait to watch it.
So cool.
Everything upgraded. I mean, upgraded. Every single piece was touched, spared no expense. Like it was, we didn't care what it was going to cost.
Yep.
We were going to make the best formula that was the closest to breast milk of anything ever created. And that's what we have.
Serenity, you bring up an amazing point around passing down tradition. Because I really worry about future generations because we have kind of given that a bad reputation in terms of, just sharing experiences when people are at similar points in life. And I know you guys have a really unique perspective on parenting. When we had our pre-call, I think, Joe, you said free range kids or free range parenting.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you guys have any advice for the young parents who are listening to this. What sort of things do you guys do that's a little bit different, but that really works for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's very similar to entrepreneurism. It's a spiritual practice. So the first and foremost idea of what I call serenity parenting, which I will write that book someday.
Need it.
Right? Hashtag serenity parenting is focusing on, first of all, approaching it from a surrendered place. Like I cannot control the outcome. I cannot control my child. I can't control the outcomes. So I have to moment to moment follow my intuition around what is the best thing to do, how do I react to them, but also what is in this for me? What is the growth opportunity here? Because it's not something you just try to get through. Postpartum, is having a first baby is the most disruptive thing of any adult's life. There's nothing more disruptive than having a baby. For moms, it's disruptive incredibly physically. Their brains completely change, their bodies completely change. For dads, we get to kind of choose how much it disrupts our lives. We can try to keep our lives the same and, miss out on the opportunity and probably end up losing the kid in the marriage if we try to do that. But it is an option for us. So really, as a dad, choosing every moment to let it work me, let it transform me, let it completely change who I am and grow up. Like it's a growing up. Like it's a rite of passage. So really approaching parenting from like, how am I going to use this to grow, to become a better person rather than feeling like a victim to it. It's common. I see a lot of victim consciousness in parents where it's like they feel like they're tolerating their kid or their kid is out to get them or their life has been destroyed by their kid. And it's like the kids are going to feel that, that's where shame in kids comes from too. So ultimately the most important thing of being a parent beyond that is avoiding shame. Like shame is the most toxic thing for any kid. That really anything else can be overcome. They'll learn whatever they're supposed to learn. They'll develop how they're supposed to develop. The biggest thing the biggest thing we can do as parents to get in the way of their natural growth and development is to in any way create or encourage shame. They're going to get it everywhere. They're going to get it from society. They're going to get it from other adults. They're going to get it in institutions like schools. So the more that we can avoid any kind of shaming and protect our kids from that, the better they're going to turn out.
What advice do you have for new couples that are thinking about starting a business together? I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but it's an interesting question.
I think, think really hard about it. And also it is both challenging, and we have had a coach this whole time that we've been working with the same coach for the last
couples coach.
8 years. And we do business stuff, we do personal stuff. Like it's really important to have an open forum where we can communicate and keep those lines of communication open. I think having really good boundaries is important. Trying to figure out when is it the right time to talk about work, when is it not. But ultimately, it's also really satisfying, right? Like I get to work all day with my best friend who I get to live with and parent with too. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of good things about it. And I will say we do meet a lot of couple founders. And we always joke, we're like, after Serenity Kids, someday maybe we'll start a couples support group for entrepreneurial couples. And they're like, sign us up. Because it is a really unique position that really, I don't think any of our friends are in.
Yeah. It's a lot more common than you think. There's a lot of advantages, obviously, but it's not for every couple. There's definitely couples that should not work together. We had a certain balance of skill set that really made it work.
We're very different.
Right. She's very methodical, very cautious, analytical. I'm very visionary, very relational, very verbal. And so, she's the brain, I'm the mouth.
Yep.
And that works really well. But and in our home life as well, that we split the duties that way helps a lot. But we do have to have a lot of boundaries. We don't talk about work in bed. It's one of the rules.
Yep, it's a rule.
We talk about work on the way to the date night, but not
at the date night.
Yeah, we're allowed to like get any last work stuff in the car. And then once you get to dinner or whatever, like no more work. We do these couples retreats every quarter. My mom comes and watches our daughter, and we go for 2 or 3 days to an Airbnb and just have couple time. Which ends up being a lot of like business visioning and other cool stuff comes out of it for the business. We don't talk about logistics of work, but we're allowed to kind of
strategic planning,
daydream or dream or think bigger. So we have to really invest in the relationship. All parents have to. I mean, that's one of those things when you have a kid, you have to actively prioritize the relationship. Working together, was even harder, but also easier to a certain extent because we can, work together all the time.
What?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd have to imagine the trust that you both have too is such a vote of confidence where it's like, at the end of the day, even if we disagree on stuff, which will happen naturally, we are always going to have each other's back. Like even Harry and I we're best friends and building this business, we agree on a ton of things. There's some things we don't, but we know it's never going to get contentious. If we disagree on something, it's like, he's got my back, I've got his back. And it's like, that's kind of been, I think, our superpower in a way that's helped us move so fast. And it sounds like those traits are very similar for both of you too.
You even dress alike.
We do even blue pants. Yeah.
That's our uniform.
Gray shirt.
Yeah.
Right?
We joke about the Step Brothers scene where they're in the bunk beds. That's us basically. Yeah.
But it's key. Yeah. For co-founders, you have to be committed to that relationship. Again, like the business itself, you can't control the outcome. You can't control your founder. You have to be in it for the relationship first to a certain extent. And if the business starts to hurt the relationship, it's only going to hurt the business. So our commitment to each other was key. All the things that made the relationship work from the balance, but also our commitment to the relationship, our willingness to talk about hard issues, to get support, to use a coach, to really be honest and vulnerable. All those things make a good marriage, but also are key for co-founders to have with each other. You're essentially marrying, you're essentially having a baby together is what you're doing. And, really that's, I think people underestimate. My first business, I had a co-founder that we had the same vision. We had the balanced skill set. We really agreed on what we wanted to create, but we weren't in it for each other. It was sort of like, if you leave, I'll hire somebody else. If you leave, it was sort of like we didn't really have it. So when there was those conflicts that are natural, if you have a balanced skill set, that means you're going to conflict as well. The balance is challenging as well. So we didn't have the foundation with each other to get through some of those issues, and then conflicts get swept under the table and issues get left and there's fights and then there's rumors and it can get ugly.
It goes back to the concept of being all in, because when you're all in, you don't think about the other person leaving because they're going to be there. They're in the trenches. Yeah. How do you guys think about building out your team? Because we're just in the early innings of thinking about building out the team, bringing on the right people. And it's such an important part of building a business. And I'm just curious how you guys have gone about doing that.
It's hard. It's the hardest thing.
It's the hardest thing.
It's the hardest thing. The relationship parts, knowing when to hire people, knowing who to hire, knowing when to fire people. When you're outgrowing somebody, when is the workload overwhelming and you need to hire an additional person. So there's no template for that. We thought there'd be like great little org charts but there's really no good. It's sort of like raising a child. Like there's no formula to when to hire, who to hire. You can do your best to ask people's advice, but ultimately you get to a point where you're spending time and energy on things that are not your skill set and that you're not either as good at and are essentially taking you longer than it would the average person, and essentially hurting the business because your attention should be on things that are as a founder like more important for the business. So there's like a size point where just your labor isn't enough to keep this going, and your labor would be better spent on the things you're good at, and you hire to fill that out. But then it's all personality. It's personality over skill set first and foremost. Like it's really, are they committed? Do you want to work with them? Do you trust them? Do they trust you? Are they willing to do whatever it takes? So those first hires are their kind of jack of all trades that are mostly just willing. There's willing. More than anything else. There's some skill set you can look for. As you grow, the niche skill sets become more and more important, and hiring for experience is the key thing, that knowing that they've already done it and have a track record there is important. But even then, culture is everything. It's all about how the vibe is of the company, of the people there. People perform optimally when they feel trusted, when they feel in the flow, when they feel safe. And that's, safe, trusted, and the flow is not your average workplace. Like that's not how most people describe their job. Oh yeah, I feel safe to be my full self and to perform at my optimal level, like said by very few employees. But I think our employees would say that they feel like that they love the job, they believe in it, they feel trusted, they love the people they work with. And that's one of the reasons we've been so successful, is creating that community.
I know there have been studies that companies that actually, like when employees are actual friends, they don't leave.
It's huge.
It's true.
So if you can foster that community, it's like, that's the ultimate gold right there. Are there any unique questions that you like to ask a potential new hire that give you insight into whether or not you want to hire someone?
We screen for values. now because you can't teach values.
Mm-hmm.
They either have them or you don't. So our values that our leaders and we formed together based off who our company was. We didn't start out with them. We created this amazing company and said, what are our values? And they're integrity, humility, hunger, and compassion are our four major values. So we screen for those. We have a series of questions for each. Screening for humility is a fun one. We ask them, like, what are things that a person in your life would say you annoy them about you, right? What are some of their pet peeves? Or tell us about somebody who's better than you at something. And, we're really asking that. Or the hunger, where we'll really ask them, tell us about a project where you over-delivered, where you had a certain deliverable, but you went above and beyond, things like that to really
or what's the hardest you've ever worked on anything in your entire life?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be work, but just know that they're passionate about something, that they've got a fire in their belly about something.
Yeah.
Because at work, you only get a tiny slice of the person, right? So you've got to make sure that whatever is on the other side is like worth getting a tiny slice of.
Yeah. I was going to say, there's something about having a mission as noble as your guys that probably attracts a bunch of missionaries who really want to carry forward what you guys are all about. So I bet you guys come across a bunch of amazing talent just because of that.
Incredible talent.
We do.
It's amazing. Our team is just ridiculous. I mean, they're just so incredible. Like for all of them, from even before we could pay much, I was super impressed with who was willing to work for us. Now we pay, it's standard wages, but it's hard work. It's it's
startup.
It's a startup. Like, it's tough. There's a lot of unknowns. We're still fairly inexperienced, as far as founders go. So there's still a lot of risk, but people are very inspired and very excited to do something meaningful.
And we have a rule. We don't hire assholes.
No assholes policy.
No assholes allowed.
Yep.
So we hire people we want to work with. We've created an environment we want to work at. We have healthy snacks. We don't buy a bunch of garbage HEB birthday cakes. Like, we make our birthday cakes, or we get the fancy gluten-free ones that my friend Leah makes at Better Bites. We really walk the walk.
Yeah. I know that the rugby team, the All Blacks in New Zealand, which is like the best sports team ever in terms of winning percentage, that's literally their team motto is no assholes. They have a no assholes policy.
I love it.
So it's the same thing.
Just like a rugby team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting too how it's like a lot of times, like you said, hiring is the most difficult piece. But if you hire the right people, the compounding effects of that can change your entire business. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, we're just introducing radical candor throughout our entire company. And I wish I'd read a long time ago, because it really gives a really strong foundation for how to be a boss, like how to manage people, how to hire people, how to support them, how to know when to fire people, how to fire people. And, there's this hire, slow, fire, fast motto that I still very much believe in. We're still really bad at, especially the fire fast part. We've gotten really good at the hire slow part. It's like 7 or 8 interviews,
That's right.
a lot of work project. Like, we've gotten really thorough with hiring because we saw what happens when you're like, oh shoot, we've got way more work than we can handle. We need to hire somebody right now. Get them in there. Like this kind of knee-jerk hiring that, of course, is a real problem in the long run. And then not giving people good feedback, and then not knowing when to let people go soon enough, or being afraid to have a gap. Ultimately, the wrong person in the job is worse than nobody in the job.
Right.
And it's been really hard for us to learn that, because it falls to us. If we fire somebody, it's like, we're the ones who
we do all the
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, so it's like, but ultimately, like, we do that, and then we do pick it up, and we're like, oh, actually, there's all these other issues we didn't even know about. It's like the tip of the iceberg that you're seeing. So really learning how to be, it's the hardest part. It's also human, it's part of being human.
How do you guys go about crafting that radical candor culture in the office? Because it really is a foundational principle of trust. Like, if you can say whatever you feel in the office, those people get the right end of, the feedback, they're getting the truth, they can then build and grow. Like, if they're not getting that, you're kind of actually doing them a disservice. Yeah.
It starts with soliciting and receiving feedback yourself. She says in the book, and we had already done this intuitively, because we were started from a place of humility of like, tell us what to do. Everybody we've hired, we've said, we need your help to build this. We don't know where the problems are. We have gaps in our leadership. Like, we need to hear it. So we've had a a real strong culture of soliciting feedback ourselves. And then, so training our managers to do that too, like just spend time and one-on-ones asking them, how can I make your job better? Like, how can I make your life better here? Or whatever questions work for you. But that's a big one to show that we love to admit mistakes or apologize. This is big with parenting too, to admit a mistake to your kid, to apologize to your kid. Really meaningful for them to see that and to have that modeled. And then we've taught the format, sent out the workshops and just encourage it and model it and provide forums for it.
So, but it's not easy. Right? I mean, it's not even easy to want feedback from your employees, right? Sometimes my feelings get hurt, or I have an old trauma that is affecting my today, even though it has nothing to do with what's happening right now. So it's about finding the courage yourself. My staff knows that, like, if they want to give me a piece of what might be hard feedback, ask me first. Be like, hey, I've got some feedback. Is now a good time? And I sometimes say no.
Yeah.
I just read this horrible email. I'm feeling really stressed out. I didn't sleep well last night. Can we do this next week or whatever? So it's also about holding your own boundaries and knowing yourself well enough to be able to go that far as to demonstrate that. And we've not always been successful by any means. Right? We've done it wrong a gajillion times, and we are really committed to figuring out how to do it better.
Well, I reward them for the feedback. I thank them,
right.
and then we implement it. We actually take it. I think similar to giving advice, taking advice. They say any piece of feedback that they give me, I go out of my way to make sure they know that I did this because they told me to, and that really encourages other people to do it and encourages them to come and do it more.
It sounds like feedback has just been a consistent theme that's come up throughout this whole podcast, whether it was with early investors, advisors, customers, and employees. It's like just that willingness and that openness to get honest feedback. That's actually how you actually get better.
Yeah. Blind spots, man. You can't see everything.
And pivoting, right? I mean, pivoting is the entrepreneur's word, right? And that's how we're doing it. We're getting feedback so that we can
constantly
navigate.
It's what the big companies can't do.
Yeah.
They can't pivot. They're dinosaurs. They don't have good cultures of feedback. They don't encourage innovation and rocking the boat. And so, I've been fired from most of the jobs I was in for having too many ideas. For telling my boss how to do their job better. They didn't want my feedback. And so I was like, I'm going to make sure we create a culture of openness, of innovation. People need to be able to point out problems. They need to be able to bring ideas. We need to reward that. And that's really allowed us to grow so fast.
When you think about the overall journey of Serenity Kids from start to this point, is there a particular win that either of you have that really sticks out as like the thing that you're personally the most proud of with the company?
I mean, I know the formula for you is like...
Launching the formula product was a true labor of love.
Hit close to home.
It hit so close to home. It was a passion project. It still is. I love that one. But I'll tell you, one of my proudest moments was very recently. We had an all-hands retreat back in April, and it was the last day, and we were kind of checking out, and I was grabbing my coffee or whatever and getting ready to head back to Austin. And I found out that some of our employees had stayed up until 4 a.m. with each other, like grown-ups, and it just like made my heart explode with pink gooey sparkles, knowing that they liked each other enough to hang out. And we had one employee who lives in Vermont who had to catch a flight, so he had to be picked up at 4 a.m. And at 3 a.m. he's like, screw it, I'm just not going to bed. And they're like, we'll stay up with you. And I really like that moment.
That's so cool.
I think the regenerative agriculture movement in general, there's no one moment, but there's been this of the pieces of our business that we've been able to touch to be able to reverse climate change, while we're feeding babies. Like that, to draw those parallels of what's good for babies is what's good for the planet, for me has been huge as an activist and, as a longtime environmentalist. I was vegan for a good part of my teenage years.
He lived in trees.
Yeah, I sat in trees to, worked with Earth First, sitting in trees, chaining myself to bulldozers, locking myself to Staples buildings to prevent old growth forests. Like it was all, so it's very passionate for the environment, and meat's been a really important part of my health journey, and really I think important for if it's as a low inflammation diet, meat's going to be one of the foundations of that. So to be able to be a part of this really emerging, very new today, but very old way of farming, a very natural way of animals living on this planet. So I think, our bison products, one of my favorites, were the first and only grass-fed bison baby food. And now this product is in Target and Walmart.
That's amazing.
And it's doing well.
Like it's like one of the top
it,
selling baby foods in Target is grass-fed, regeneratively farmed bison,
Wow.
and it's like that to me is like crazy cool that I've been able to be a part of that.
Do you guys find that the customer is resonating with the regenerative agriculture component of the business?
The environmental piece has always been really important to our customer. We launched especially in the natural channel. So Whole Foods was our first major account. They brought us nationally, and then we're now in pretty much every natural food store nationwide. Meat is fairly new to the natural channel.
It is.
The vegetarians had really, convinced everybody that meat was bad for you, was bad for the planet. So a lot of the health food and natural food stores didn't have a lot of meat. Epic changed that. Epic was one of the first companies to really loudly bring meat to the natural food space. And the way they did it was with really strong sourcing. They said, this is actually good for the environment to have this meat product. And of course, everybody loves meat. Americans love meat. We naturally crave meat. So people were literally hungry for the meat to come. So it was easier to get it in than it was for the vegans to get it out. And so, so for us, that sourcing was going to be a key part of the story of if you're a little queasy about meat, or if you're uncomfortable, you think it's not good for you, or you think that it's bad for the planet, you can trust ours. So we actually have a lot of vegan parents that feed their kids our products.
Oh, wow.
Because they recognize their kid needs to make the decision for themselves. If they do any kind of nutrition research, they'll see how important it is.
For cognition.
And then they can feel that this is ethical, that there's a lot of ethics and a lot of intention put into the standards of our products for the animals, for the farmers, for the planet.
And I'd say those are our niche customers. We also have the conventional consumer that may or may not even know anything about regenerative ag, or may not care. But I have some cousins who, when I launched this product, they were like, "Oh, this is cool. This is," and they do not care about regenerative agriculture. They shop at Walmart in rural Kentucky, and they're like, "This is kind of like what I would eat for dinner."
Yeah.
So to them, it just makes sense.
Yeah, it intuitively makes sense.
Yeah.
Are you both hopeful that we can fix the baby food industry and the food system? Hopeful all
That's
day long.
why we're doing it.
I mean, we are now, less than 5 years in, we are the fastest selling brand in all grocery channels. We're the fastest selling baby at Walmart.
Yep.
We're fastest selling baby food at Target. We're been the fastest selling at Whole Foods since we launched. So, maybe that's not as remarkable, but we're fastest selling baby food at Kroger. So, and that's with just a handful of SKUs with double the price point, with, very little marketing. And so that, to me, it just shows how ready people were for this. And people notice when those numbers are public. So other brands, other companies, other people are noticing that, and we hope to see a change in the whole industry. Those bigger companies are very slow to make change. So there hasn't been much change yet. Even 5 years isn't very long for those people.
Yeah.
But we very much believe that we're showing that this is the future, that this is possible, and we want to continue making more and more products and aging up with our consumer. So we want to bring what we've done in baby into all children's food products.
What can people expect from you guys next? More products?
More and more all the time. We've got more pouches coming out. We've got other kinds of styles of foods coming out. But ultimately, what we're most excited about are children's food products. Our daughter's almost 5 now. She just stopped eating the pouches, and she's ready for other foods. So we're going to take this value proposition we have, which is a combination of nutrient density, right? Genuinely nutritious, not just less bad for you, but packed with nutrition, utilizing regenerative meat wherever possible, since it's the most nutritious. Great taste, good tasting products. Health food can taste good. Meat and veggies are actually really good. You get the fat in there. You don't need sugar. The fat, is tasty. In formats that are already ready to eat, convenient formats that parents and kids already love. So we're not trying to create some new weird thing that they're not familiar with, but swapping out what they're already eating with nutrient-dense, great-tasting versions, so we can really make it easy to feed kids healthy. It's like these products, they're easy, they're convenient, they taste great, the kids love them, and they're full of really good meat and veggies. That's to us the real secret for success, as well as the way we're going to challenge the really national health food crisis that we have. This children's health crisis in this country is unprecedented. 1 in 5 kids diagnosed obese. 1 in 5 kids are diabetic or pre-diabetic. 1 in 5 will be diagnosed with a mental or emotional disorder by the age of 16. All these food related, and we want to change that.
That's incredible. Well, we can't wait to see what the next 5 to 10 years looks like for Serenity Kids. And for us, number one, we're just grateful to have both of you in the studio today, sitting down and talk with us. And secondly, we're just grateful for what you do, having people like you that are brave. You're putting your money where your mouth is. You're investing in the right products and ingredient sources, and you're really trying to change this industry, and you're leading with this mission-first business. So we learned a ton from this conversation. We're just so grateful for both of you. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us and helping us get the word out.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Thanks.
Thanks.